Hey everyone, welcome to the Nikki Smash Show. Today I have, well, I mean, this introduction is probably the best one yet, without a shadow of a doubt. We have an author, a coach, a speaker who works with the creatives and entrepreneurs in the music industry. He's worked with rock stars, #1 selling artists, award winners, as well as producers, songwriters, and sports people. So without further ado, Nick, how are you, man? Welcome to the show.
I'm very good, brother. Very good. Oh, excuse me. Wow.
Need more coffee, man.
Do you want to do that again?
I'm doing it.
Sorry, I didn't realize that was going to come out like that.
That's all right, mate. That's all right. I mean, look at the state of me. I have to wear so much to look like I'm doing all right. And don't worry, I cough and splutter all the time. You know, probably just a good way to level the interview and the stuff. Look how we've started already. That's
I know.
It's
also that like low level kind of like COVID anxiety of like, am I allowed to clear my throat in public? You know, so it's like,
oh yeah, yeah, totally, man. It's like if you have like a small, you know, like grass throat or whatever, you know, and you're out there and you just go, excuse me, sorry, what was that? And people are like, whoa, this guy's infected. You know, like 28 days later or something like that, they're like, he's infected, you know, and yeah, it's terrible. I shouldn't joke about it, but you know, it does feel like that. You know, you're trying to buy some apples and yet people are going, this guy's got it, you know. Yeah, terrible, dude.
Yeah.
So how are you, mate? What have you been up to apart from changing the world?
Pretty much just that, really. Just talking to a lot of people, playing a little bit of saxophone for my own enjoyment. There's no fucking gigs, but apart from that.
Oh, mate, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. So I suppose I'd like to jump straight into the deep end with you because you offer something very unique in the world, let alone just the music industry. I don't see a lot of this type of caliber of high quality work, you know, and that's not me trying to, you know, become chummy with you because we already are chums. You know, me just stating like my opinion on what the work that you're doing, and it's quite amazing stuff. You know, when I first discovered you and the book, it was like, oh shit, you know. And I suppose let's start off with probably the beginning of like performance anxiety, really. You know, I get that sometimes, you know, I get it more in the studio than I do live. There we go, clearing the throat again. It's the guilty thing now. It's like a seed in my head, so now I'm going to keep doing it. Yeah, so it's like, I get it, but only really in the studio. I mean, people call it like red light syndrome, don't they? You know, but I hate recording vocals in the studio. Hate it. I just hate being under the microscope like that. You know, like every little weird thing you do, like between a phrase, you'll hear me going like, and I don't realize you do like weird little shit, you know, with your voice, like your like mini clearings of your voice and stuff before you go for a big take or something. And that's all picked up. And when you hear it back, you're like, what's all that noise? And it's like, oh, that's just you like spluttering, you know, between between a sentence, and I've got to edit it out. And it's like, oh, great. You know, and that kind of adds to like, oh, I hope I'm not going to do those weird noises, or, you know, oh, I can't quite do this take. I'm going to have to put a guitar around me that's not plugged in and pretend to play it, you know, so I can get some like, oh, gusto, you know, going into like certain things, you know. So I have that type of thing on that. And maybe a day or two before playing live, I get the thing of, what the fuck am I doing? You know, I should have just stayed in school. You know, I should never have, you know, God damn my supportive parents for pushing me into this career. You know, and I think, Christ alive, you know, I'm about to pour my heart and soul out in terms of song. And then people are going to make a judgment on it. And you go like, yeah, that's, that will do it. You know? So how do you, you know, I mean, that's a very minor, that's like that's like skimming the dust off the top of the shelf before you get to the books type of thing. You know, how do you teach, or not teach, that's the wrong way. How do you coach people through all this stuff, you know? And where did you get the inspiration to start doing all this stuff?
Well, to rewind a little bit, so the experience of performance anxiety, like that's definitely something I had. I remember, you know, I studied violin at university and music college, and I remember standing outside a performance class and like trying to do the things that I was told I should do, like breathe in a certain way, or I'd read somewhere about, you know, visualizing yourself was really powerful or something, or like
Right, yeah.
other visualizations I've been told to do. And somewhere along the line, I noticed that those kinds of like mental techniques, which are very popular and people like to, or like musicians like to share, or parents like to share, or teachers or whatever, those techniques, they sometimes made me feel a bit like, yeah, I've got control of my thinking. But quite often they kind of highlighted the fact that I didn't have control of my thinking, because I was trying to, you know, I was trying to force myself to like put on a smile or feel good. And I knew that wasn't true beneath the surface. And I was really curious about that. So, you know, I started off, by sort of reading things, and I sort of I developed the exploration of it, to looking for a career change, because I used to be a teacher, but I ended up sort of stumbling across a very simple but hidden understanding of the mind. This is just one simple trick of the mind that I couldn't believe that no one had ever told me about. That actually the mind was working in a way that I didn't think it was working, and there were a load of implications to that. And
Right.
so when I was told about that, and I started to explore it for myself, and found actually, wow, this seems to actually be true. It's weird, but it seems to be true. I started seeing shifts in my own life that were so significant that I felt like the whole industry needs to know about this, because I suddenly realized that a lot of the thinking that I had about myself, and I'd really thought, oh, I can't tell anyone about that because it's so embarrassing. It's like, I didn't realize everyone was having the same kind of thinking as me.
Right, yeah.
I thought it was just, because I felt so isolated in my like anxieties or my insecurities, that I thought that was a fact, that it was just me. And it turns out it wasn't. And so, you know, I started looking for other people doing the same kind of work, and it turned out that there's only a handful of people doing something even similar to what I'm doing. So what I do with people who come to me with performance anxiety is I point them in the direction of this same understanding.
Yeah.
This understanding, what I call the inside out understanding of the mind.
Explain more of that, dude, because that's, you know, the inside. Yeah, okay, right. You got me here already.
So, like, if I asked you the question, and I've asked people this question quite a lot, you know, if I asked you the question, and it might sound a bit weird, so got to go with me, but if I
know, I'm free floating.
if I ask you the question, like, where do you think your feelings come from? Is it 100% from the outside? Is it 100% from the inside? Or is it a combination of the two?
Fuck. Okay. I'd say that's possibly a combination of the two.
Boom. Okay, so that's
a reason why.
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's because a certain situation from a primal state influences you from a fight or flight thing as a primary thing in pretty much 90% of situations. And from that, whether you then deem whether it's safe or not, you know, fight or flight type of thing. And that could be anything from going to the shops or playing a gig or whatever. And then if something makes you happy or sad, it's then determined off one of those, how can I say, you know, junctures, you know, subheadings of that. So if there's a situation that's making you sad, you could be happy one minute, and if you hear about some bad news, then that outside news has influenced the way that you feel. So it's I think it's how you react to certain situations. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're in good company, because that's overwhelmingly what people say when I ask the question. And it makes sense, because a lot of that stuff that you said there about fight or flight and stuff, we're talking about the kinds of things you might get taught at school with like a kind of emergency response, and what it's talking about is what the body does, right?
Yeah.
As a kind of result of something. But the thing that I hadn't noticed was that even if there's a strong so-called like stimulus out there,
Yeah.
that you know, someone asked me like, where do you think your reaction to the stimulus takes place? And I was like, okay, well, it takes place inside me. Okay, cool. Okay, so how come? So like, if are you telling me that if someone is really angry in traffic and they kind of cut me up, that's me making that up? And it's like, actually, no, it's not that I'm saying that like 100% of your feelings are made up feelings, but what I'm saying is that there's only one place that you can experience your reality, which is inside you, inside the mind.
Yeah. Okay.
And even the stuff that seems, and this is crucial, right? Even the stuff that seems like it's being done to us by life, by people, by our past, by our future imagined, even that stuff, the stuff that looks like it's really being done to us, there's this elephant in the room. There's this fact that it's any emotional response we have is our own. It is created by our thinking, actually. And I don't just mean like thinking about stuff intellectually. I mean, it's like virtual reality goggles and kind of generating the entirety of our experience. The whole thing is being, and it's a freak show. It's a total kind of like, whoa, this is really weird. And I'm fully aware of how weird that kind of sounds, but when you stop
relate to it, man, I'm like, yes, that's fucking bang on. It is, isn't it? It's interpretation of things you're seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting, as it were. And yeah, I've had a bit of a light bulb there, as you said that. It is coming from your mind. Your mind's determining a feeling, and then you're living that feeling. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the mind is so powerful that, you know, thought is so powerful that it can create something and convince itself that it's true. So it's especially when it comes to like what something means in life, you know. So say, for example, you know, and you know, musicians say that, you know, I've got a gig coming up and it's a big gig, it's an important gig, or they say there's a load of pressure on me from this gig.
Yeah.
Right. And I've heard people say that, and I know what the concept, you know, conceptually, I know what a big gig means, because conceptually in their career, this one is for 50,000 people, and it's not to, you know, a room of 1,000 people or whatever. It's conceptually different, but in terms of how the perception, how the experience in the moment is being created, it's exactly the same. You know, there's music happening, there's experience being created, there's feelings being created, and they're being created inside me. They're being created inside my psychology. You know, there's not a single wrong note that can actually technically make you feel bad, or there's not one single, you know, career blunder that can actually make you, you know, feel like a failure. But because we have the feeling of I feel like a failure, and don't notice that we created the feeling ourselves innocently, and it's not like we had any choice, that was just what came up in our psychology. We think it's caused by the outside thing, and then what we do is, because we have this kind of outside in misunderstanding, then we try to protect ourselves from this outside world that's a threat. So if we've been stung by a bad performance, then we try and we do everything we can to avoid having big performances. Or if we found a pre-performance ritual that helped us out once, we're going to do it again because it prepares us, it makes us safe. And then we get really anxious when it doesn't quite work in the same kind of way. It's like, oh no, I need to try something else. And then it becomes a kind of self-fulfilling, like, I've got to think about this. I've got to think about this as well. Oh, I've got to read this book about my thinking about this. And it's like, and this one, and I didn't realize this until I really sort of got quiet and looked at the implications of this one little switch, because it was like the entirety of my, I mean, this is ridiculous to say, but it felt like it's true. The entirety of my life up until that point had been based on a very shaky foundation about how my feelings worked.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Do you know where that stemmed from? Could you pinpoint where, how can I say, like the fork in the road? Could you pinpoint
the change or the? Yeah. Well, I did a bunch of training, so I got, when was it? So after graduating, I'd had a few shoulder problems as a violinist, and so I got really curious about how I could become a better player, how I could heal my body and stuff. So I started reading books, and I did some training. So I did a bunch of coach training things, and one of the coach trainings was coming from this inside out understanding. And it was, and I'd done quite a bit of stuff by then, but when I came across this, it was really disarmingly simple, but actually it's one of the first things that actually really made a difference in my life, rather than having a load of things to talk about as a coach and this is, here's the psychoanalytical reason, or here's the language pattern that you use that was wrong, instead of doing all that stuff and trying to be the mansplainer. Actually, I was just like, I could look at people and go, I know what the problem is here, because everyone's up against this same outside in misunderstanding to varying degrees. And some people have got it, they're really, really attached to the idea of it being outside in, and others are kind of sort of subtly chipping away at the little bits of misunderstanding in various parts of their lives. But it really was a fork in the road. And I know you can sometimes hear in the coaching industry, or like the self-help world, or like the Hollywood films, it's changed my life. But I really feel like a very different person, and in a very different kind of space, sort of compared to where I was, because I was always kind of a high achiever and always quite I've always done okay for myself, but
is that due to, do you have like a strong drive to do that? Is that like winners never quit type of thing that's ingrained in you? Like, not maybe necessarily a competitive streak, but do you have that drive just naturally, just like, well, it doesn't matter what's in front of me, good or bad, I'm gonna kill it type of thing?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think I've always been, I have been pretty driven, but that's also been a blind spot. It's been part of the reason why I needed not needed help, but part of the reason why I kind of ended up doing the work I do, probably because I found that I spent probably most of my teens and early 20s pushing myself, so-called like pushing, trying to be a winner and trying to get in, pass auditions, or trying to perform in a certain way. And what I was actually doing was trying to think my way through life as hard as I could, and I didn't realize I was doing that. I just thought that if you wanted to achieve, that meant think harder, or think better, or find out more about how you can think about it. And no, it's like no one had ever told me until I was introduced to this understanding, no one had ever told me that you don't have to think your way through life. Like I was allowed. It was a ridiculous epiphany for me, but I was allowed to actually like get off the hamster wheel of life. Like I was allowed to get off, and I could have a rest, and I could just be average bloke or average Nick. I could even forget the fact that I was calling myself a musician and wanting to be something special. I could just be me, the same me that, you know, you close the door, you know, in your house or your flat or whatever, and it's just real you. I could be real me all the time. I didn't have to be something fake, you know. And that, I thought that if I did that, then then what would come out of that wouldn't be enough. That's why I didn't do it, you know. And I realized that actually, part of the reason that some of the most high performing musicians sort of make it look so effortless is because it is effortless for them. It's like you know, they for whatever reason either dropped or never developed the kind of must think about my performance, must overanalyze. They hung out in reality, which is I'll play a bit and then when I'm done I'll stop, you know. And lots of people don't do it that way. So it's it turns out that when I show people the same understanding, and we go and we sort of look at the implications in their life, and we kind of unpick this old way of thinking, and they get more grounded in what's true about themselves and how their psychology actually works. Then a load of the overthinking stops, and they can kind of go in a more direct, straight line to what they're trying to do. So they tend to learn skills quicker. They tend to be happier. They tend to feel more connected to people because they haven't got this bunch of thinking about themselves on their mind. In the background that they just got used to. It just kind of is like the mind just is suddenly allowed to quieten because they don't need to protect against anything. It's just by implication, and suddenly like a light bulb gets switched on, and you kind of there's a simplicity about life that's available to you, you know.
Yeah, I really relate to that. I had a massive, as you know, I've had a massive like transition in my life for the last 2 years, and there was a point where, you know, last year where I kind of had to put everything down and just, you know, be me. And I realized, hang on a minute, the me that I'm left with is I wasn't very happy. So it's like, oh well, I better do something about that, really. You know. So I made massive changes in my life, but you know, to the outside they were like fucking ginormous. Like, what are you doing? How are you doing that? But no one ever once asked you, like, are you actually happy? Are you okay? You know, and it's funny that people just look at the action rather than why the action's taking place. Just as a kind of, you know, how I relate to how that, you know, that change in who you are. And I think it's very important because when you do realize that, like you said, like I can just be me and I can make me anything, but it's still me, rather than it putting on characters or you know, dressing up for something, if you know what I mean, like you're saying there. And it's quite the we've spoken about this, like, you know, a few times off before podcasting and stuff and hanging out, and it's very much kind of like you do have those epiphany moments where you sit there and go, oh, I don't have to do that. You know, like, you know, if I'm just me, then if someone doesn't like me or someone likes me, equally, I'm okay with both. Because I've got nothing to hide. I've got nothing to prove. I'm just me, you know. And it's funny, the transition you make through that. And I'm actually, you know, I'm having the time of my life now because of that, you know, like, and everything becomes very, not easy, but there's just, I always say, like, there's this calm, collective, logistical way of doing stuff that benefits yourself. People may say that's a bit selfish, and I'm like, I don't think it is. You know, I don't think, you know, self-care and realizing who you are and being okay with that is selfish. I think that actually helps other people, because you know, you're able to understand yourself in such a manner, you know, where you don't have to put yourself in like XYZ situation, what have you, and to have people, you know, react to things you do, or, you know, in a certain way or what have you. And I know I'm slightly being cryptic there with kind of like the subject of where I'm laying these kind of terminologies in. However, like talking from a music point of view, I had a big thing with that music last year, and it was like, yeah, I you know, I need to just hang on a minute with it. And everyone was like, what the fuck? You know, and it was like, yeah, I'm a human, right? Yeah, can no one else relate to that?
Well, isn't that interesting, because that's like, you know, you said about being selfish, but it depends, and this might sound a bit sort of esoteric, but the when we start to talk about self, you know, people understand that to mean different things, you know, quite radically different things. And you know, for some people it's like a role that you have to play. For some people the self is the body. But what it looks like, what it seems like to me, is that as the mind kind of quietens down, and the stories about the self, whatever that is, kind of quieten, and you kind of fall into reality. Like it's the same kind of space you get into when you're in a performance and it just feels like the whole room is one thing, and that there's just music taking place, or, you know, you're having a connected conversation with someone and you don't feel like you're really two separate people. You just feel like there's just good times happening. It just feels like one thing going on. It's kind of like a spiritual experience, and the spiritual traditions, like through the ages, have pointed to this thing, whether they've called it oneness or whether they've called it sort of the difference between the finite mind and the universal mind, or whether they talk about, you know, God's will, or whatever, however they word it. But there is this kind of sort of falling out of your personal thinking into the present moment, or into connection, and that's what I'm hearing you say when you say about it being like a kind of deeper meaning to the word selfish. It's like being concerned with big self, like being with what's true. And it actually benefits people, because like when you speak your truth, then actually people can go, oh yeah, that I can relate to the reality of that. I can relate to the honesty of that. Me too, brother. You know, like behind the scenes, behind my mask, I'm the same as you. And that's the universal. And then it's funny because like the more I found, like in my writing and in the way I coach people, like when I share more personal stories, the stuff that's a bit edgy for me to share in a coaching session, go, oh, am I giving too much away? It really hits them a lot harder, because it's like they can feel the truth behind it. Because it's similar to their, you know, that there's something about it that they can relate to. It's the same for like the singer-songwriters that I work with as well. It's like those songs that are a bit edgy to share, that go there, you know. Those are the ones that really, like, they'll polarize your audience, but the ones it grabs, my God, you know, it's like, how did you speak to me through that music?
It's quite the thing, isn't it? You know, it's I'm very black and white when it comes to listening to music, and I think that's from a singer-songwriter point of view, where I write about I try and be as honest and as personal as I possibly can when I write, because not only do I believe that I do believe it, you know, I'm not afraid to say this, you know, I believe that I have a purpose to kind of, you know, raise awareness for men in a certain area of life. And I also have a thing where I want women to be heard in certain things as well. So I'm doing work on both sides, you know, and not to separate them, but to kind of make sure that the correct sides are heard in the correct manner, I think. You know? And I truly believe, like, I have a purpose now, is not to be like some giant rock star, as much as that, you know, that might upset 15-year-old me if I would them, you know, is that I have a different purpose now, you know, and I'm excited by that, you know, where I'm kind of on this like mission now, you know, and when you listen to music and it goes like, and you go like, fuck, like it just goes like straight to you, and you go like, shit, like I don't quite understand what he's talking or she's talking about yet, but the feeling has got me. So the honesty there's a level that I'm in sync with this artist with, and on a higher vibration, say, do you know what I mean? So can you hear that?
I can hear that, yeah.
You can. Fucking, that's really annoying. It's the realms of not being in a studio and having that. Is it detracting too much from my talking?
It's a little bit musical.
Isn't it? Yeah. I have to try and see, like, viewers, I'm very sorry, I can only work with what I've got there. You know, fucking hell, it's annoying. Yeah, there's definitely like a high vibration, I find, where you connect with the artist, you know.
Yes.
And before you look at the lyrics or even get to the fucking chorus of the song, there's something that just gets you, you know.
That's exactly what my experience was like, and it's not music, but it's a similar kind of thing. That was exactly my experience when I've spoken to some of the, I guess, like spiritual teachers and coaches that I've ended up having mentoring from. Like some people have got, it's not necessarily a journey, but when they speak to you or when they listen to you, they've got this ability to, it's almost like they're listening to your soul. They're so quiet, their own mind is so quiet, and like their kind of monkey mind isn't chattering away, that they're just like their own kind of insecurities and whatever are out of the way. They're not really part of the equation at all, and you feel like you're listened to in such a deep way that there's just a real power to that connection, and then anything that comes out of the conversation is honest and true and really gets to the heart of it. And it I've noticed this particularly about those people who have kind of explored the same understanding, that actually often there's a kind of straightforwardness that I've noticed that I certainly didn't used to have. About it and about them, and I've certainly felt that about me evolving. Like I certainly feel like I'm more in that space. I'm not saying like I'm the most grounded individual in the entire world or whatever, but because I think there's always more to see. But I definitely don't find myself kind of overthinking conversations with people in quite the same way that I would used to. And like, I'll come off a telephone call and go, oh, did I say the right thing? Or I should have said this. I don't do that kind of ruminating thing anymore. And this is why my work sort of fascinates me so much, because there's this amazing kind of parallel between how music gets you and just how human beings get you. I just love the kind of parallels between those two.
Yeah, it is. It's funny that, you know, I was just looking at some more of the topics to kind of cover with you there just very quickly, and it's interesting when you're saying like the overthinking side of things, like after a phone call or something, because when I've been working in PR and the first time like I had to make a phone call to like Kerrang Tower or Planet Rock Towers or something, and it was like, oh yeah, my name's Nikki and I'm working for, you know, just like I held my breath and talked my chest and I could talk, you know, like this thing. And I remember thinking, you're fucking ridiculous, man. You know, like, well, who am I talking to? My old headmaster at school. Like, you know, this person's probably just going, do you want an email? Yeah, cool, just ask, who do you want? You know, like they don't care. Yeah. And in my head, I'm like, fucking hell, I'm calling Planet Rock Towers or Kerrang Towers. Like, holy shit. You know, like, I can't. You know? Yeah. And then off the phone, you're like, oh, I sound like a dickhead. Oh, I bet they think I'm a right twat. You know, it's just like such an, you know, whenever I've had people call me about stuff, I don't go, well, they sounded like a twat. I don't think like that. So why would they? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Like,
do it. I've
so
had that kind of experience. Absolutely know what you mean. Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's so funny, that overthinking side of things, and when you share it with someone else like this, everyone goes like, "Yeah, why do we do that?"
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
And then like it's like a silly thing, like before Just Eat. Do you remember like if you're ordering a takeaway with friends, it would be like, "Shotgun not calling."
Yeah.
Shotgun, I'm not calling them. I'm not talking to them. I don't, you know, laugh or something. It's such a weird thing to get wrapped up in.
Yeah.
You know, just something as simple as that. And yeah, the overthinking side of things is really interesting. I do it a lot. I think, you know, I've said this to people before. I don't think there's another industry apart from sports and music that analyze themselves inwardly in such detail. If you look at like corporations of like, I don't know, Apple or Microsoft or, you know, Coca-Cola or something, they don't pinpoint individuals. They pinpoint sections of things, and they have giant board meetings where they go, you lot are responsible for this mistake. They don't go like, you let the goal in. You know what I mean? So it's funny, like how like sports people as well, they do it all the time. You see them, they're like, you know, they miss like they miss a penalty, and it's like, you know, they've just seen their friend get shot, you know, and they're just like, and the rest, and then they get subbed off 5 minutes later because they're like the shell of the person they once were. You know, it's crippling, and it's so, the self analysis of it all is crazy. And I've done it before in the early days of like being in the Rocket Dolls. It was like this ruthless kind of almost soulless approach to kind of trying to be better. Like we set up video cameras like shit, you know, like 50 quid video cameras that could take live sound at the time. They weren't in, you know, it wasn't about the visual, it was about the sound, you know. So then what we do is we'd listen back to it like a day after the show and just fucking just pick holes in it, like ruthlessly, and just be like, dude, you can't sing that bit out of time again. It sounds awful. Like, you know, and like that drum fill, just, dude, you know, like really like, and it was all like, it wasn't meant in a personal attack nature, but it was just so ruthless and like, you know, like, I suppose it, you know, I remember saying it's like being in the back room of, you know, of a football club, you know, where the manager's just like laying in hairdryer treatment type of scenario, you know, and I'm thinking like, surely there's got to be a better way of making everyone happy, but do it. But I was kind of known for being a bit of a dick like that, you know, for all, you know, I'm well aware of that, you know, I especially am now, and I'm certainly not like that now. I have gained people skills to be able to get the message across without being a nasty person, you know. But I suppose there is part of that ruthlessness, that self-analytical thing that, you know, the sum of all parts, you know, if we're talking music especially, you have the drummer, bass player, guitar player, the singer, you know, they create a band, you know. The band is not just one person, you know, it's like, you know, the sum of all parts. It creates something, and within that's the team. It's the same as a sports team, you know. And then you go like, oh, our bass player's weak, we need to get rid of him and get a new one. It's the same thing as like transfer window, where they go like, need a better right back, we better put some money in.
It's kind of you know, I might sound like a broken record, but you know, it really seems like the whole thing's built on this. That, you know, it boils down to this same misunderstanding, because you know, people do things because they make sense to them. So like what you described about whether it's being perfectionistic towards others or towards oneself, it's like there's a reason why people do that. And you know, I've certainly done that very, very cruel kind of self-talk thing to myself. It's like, oh, I can't believe you messed that up, this is terrible, who do you think you are? You know, you do all that kind of thing because you know, there's this kind of thought about who you should be, and there's this thought about who you are allowing yourself to be, and there's a thought who you're not allowing yourself to be, and it's all made up of thought. But because we really believe what we think, and this is subtle, this is not something you consciously do, but it's kind of beneath the surface quite a lot of the time. It's like if someone violates their own kind of rules of acceptability, it then becomes something I've got to hide away, or I have to change it so that I feel okay. It's like I've got to change this outside story so that I will be okay, essentially. And when there's not so much pressure to force yourself to be a certain way, or force yourself to be somewhere else, then you can kind of much more easily kind of, sometimes you need to take a break. Sometimes you do need to be direct with someone, like say if you're talking to somebody else and it's not quite working out, sometimes you do need to be direct and say, well, okay, the notes need to be right here. This isn't working, and sometimes it is the right thing to sort of get rid of someone, but it doesn't need to come from a kind of place of, I don't know, fear or a sense of lack. And it's almost like there's a kinder way, but because we're kind of caught up in our own thinking, we just don't see it. We don't see other options of how to be. And it's really common, it's not like this is something going wrong. It's a really common thing to be caught by the outside in misunderstanding. But as soon as you fall out of that, then there's a kind of, it starts with being kinder to yourself. You end up being kinder to yourself because you don't need to change yourself. You don't need to kind of force yourself into something. I'm not saying that you don't have skills that can get better or worse, or you can have achievements, but there's like this part of you, this kind of spiritual core of you that doesn't get touched by the achievements of life. Once I just, like, someone told me this, I never noticed it, but like once I realized that it didn't matter how many certificates I had, like I wouldn't make my essence any better. That's just there, and it's whole and complete and perfect, and it doesn't really know that much about my music career. It doesn't care whether I have a good gig or not. It's just once I realized that you're okay no matter what, like genuinely okay, then it meant I could play the game of life
totally
more kind of fearlessly in a way.
Yeah, almost like you've got like an invisibility cloak and you can just swan around and you're not pestering other people, no one's pestering you. You can just float in, float out, and it's all good, and it's all I think there's something to be said. People I've said this to someone, I said it on someone else's show that I was on, that sometimes people undervalue the word okay. Like, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Then that's good. Being okay can be great, but people sometimes feel compelled to, just go like, oh, I'm okay. Like it's a bad thing. It's like, well, then you're not. You're using the terminology wrong, and you're kind of devaluing
I should be exceptional. I should be better than average.
Yeah, I should
be different.
Fucking the best I've ever been.
Yeah.
And I had that as well. Like in like last year with the big life transitions, and people, if people did say, are you all right? I'd be like, dude, I've never been happier. And that was true. But there was like a kind of compelling way to say, yes, I am. It had to be embellished some way. Like just going, yeah, man, I'm cool. Wasn't good enough to tell people. It's funny that, and I see it a lot now. But you can only, like you were saying there, I can only really understand it or look back on it with an abstract, like hindsight 2020 thing, or see it in other people only because I've experienced it and gone through it myself. It's kind of like my journey. But going back to that thing of without it being too spiritual, like, you know, I'm not a religious guy at all. I class myself as like an atheist, but I do believe in the power of the universe. And I do believe like the law of attraction. I'm well into that. And, you know, I'm very, very, I suppose there is a level of spirituality that I do hold where, you know, it's not like, you know, oh, look, this guy can't walk and now he can type of shit. It's very much on the level of, you know, I'm all right. I've had this like epiphany moment, and it's like someone's taken off glasses that you don't need. You know, it's like someone saying with your vision, like your vision's actually fine, but someone's forcing you to wear these glasses that are like, you know, they adjust your vision somewhere, and you can't, you know, things are blurry, and, you know, things are altered in a negative way, and you can't quite make things out here, you can't quite make things out there, but you're bumbling and fumbling along in a kind of feeble matter. And then when you take them off and you kind of have a moment to kind of, you know, look around, as I suppose in a way COVID has been able to do that to some.
Yeah, true.
It has, even though yes, it has been hard, you know, because of, you know, the obvious reasons, of course, you know, but I'm also grateful for the pause in the planet. I have to say, you know, I am very grateful for it, because without it, I wouldn't be as happy as I would be now, because I've had the chance to like just go like, well, hang on a minute, do you know what I mean? Reassess, you know, work out what's happy, what's not, what I want to keep, what I don't want. And, you know, and as a result of that, I'm more successful in life than I've ever been. And is that down to COVID? It's not down to COVID. It gave me an opportunity to be able to do that, I think, you know.
Well, I think you know, I think it's all pointing in the same direction. It's pointing towards, you know, whether it's kind of artificially imposed, you know, that they have to sort of pause and reflect. What seems to have happened for a lot of people, right, like at the moment, or like when they've kind of had some kind of whether it's a spiritual epiphany or whether they've just had a kind of aha moment in their life and things have changed, is that they've gone inside in some way. They've kind of they've mentally kind of slowed down, reflected, and just noticed what's true. Like you said, instead of being caught in a world of thinking, they've actually sort of just stopped for a moment and gone, hang on a minute, what's actually true here? Who am I? Like, is this true? Is what I think true? Oh, maybe it's not true. Oh, that means this. There's other possibilities than I'd realize. There's a different way to live. So it's like they see life differently, and as a result, they live life differently. And it's just one thought. It's just one fresh take on reality, or something about reality that became noticed, and then boom, a completely different life unfolds.
Yeah, totally. I have definitely lived exactly what you've said there, and the journey was tough. But like, you know, I say it with my partner Beck. It's like, you know, she's actually got a very similar story to me, which is a great thing, because we can both share some, you know, some very amazing stories, even though they may not be pleasant. You know, sharing them is quite a powerful nature, you know, as you know, but it's like having that, you know, is quite the thing, you know, being able to do that. And yeah, it's, you know, do you know, I love this type of stuff, because, you know, as we're talking, you know, my mind is becoming even more open than it already was. And, you know, I'm exercising extra bits here, and I'm able to think like, oh yeah, and, you know, be grateful for, you know, the treacherous journey I have, type of thing. And, you know, I'm at peace with my journey, you know, I'm very comfortable with it. And I think there's something else that we've spoken about this before, where, and I think this has something to do with kind of the overthinking and the performance anxiety. I think it all kind of molds into one here where you kind of go, I'm trying to look over the wall too much. You know, I'm like, fucking hell, I've got to get over this. You know, this is the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're like this all the time, you don't realize there's actually a door. You just open and walk through and you're already there. And that's right in front of you. But because you're always going, I need to get up, you know, here, and I need to do this, and I've got a gig in 2 years' time that I need to prep for now. It's like, what about the gig tomorrow night you need to worry about, actually? You know, and what about actually, you know, picking up the kids from, you know, daycare? That's probably more important today than playing the gig tomorrow. You know, and things like that, and having that kind of like, you know, this is kind of like drifting into a bit of Eckhart Tolle, the power of now type of ideology, where you're living in just your now. And the only thing that is actually real is now. There is no future, there is no past, you know, it's just now. And people you see it all the time, you know, politics, sport, music, you know, it's always over there somewhere. You know, we've got to get to the end of the season. We've got to get to the third single before we can announce the tour. We've got to get to our third album. You know, we've got to get to this. We have to be able to, you know, do this. It's never like, you know, you see it with, you know, legendary bands and stuff, and artists, you know, they say, oh man, it was a whirlwind. I wish I'd have paid more attention. And you think, fuck, well, how could you not have paid attention at that time? You know, shit was amazing, you know. And, you know, it's when you do realize that, Nick, it's quite the thing. When, you know, again, me and my partner Beck, you know, we both have that, we share that ideology. We both like the fact that we can sit in the now and go like, oh, I don't, you know, someone's going like, what are you going to do in September and stuff? I'm like, I don't fucking care. You know, it's like, I'm quite happy with, you know, like, all right, I know what I'm happening today. I've got this with you, which is amazing. And then I've got a meeting, and then I'm going to lecture, you know, and going to spend some time with the family and stuff. That's my day, and that's wicked. And I'm very appreciative and very grateful to be able to do that. And I'm able to do that because it's now. You know, I'm not worrying about my meeting later on. I know it's there, you know, but I'm not going, oh, fucking hell, I've got this meeting later. You know, I'm just like, right now, I'm chatting to Nick and I'm having a fucking great time doing so. And being very happy, you know, it's like really realizing kind of what's happening now. You know, when I say to people, they go like, oh man, I've got this thing later, and you know, at the end of the week, I've got to do this and that. And I'm like, what are you doing now? Oh, well, you know, I've got, you know, no one really, some people just don't know what they're actually doing right now because they're just concentrating and worrying about stuff that can't be changed or can't be dealt with until you're there. You know?
Yeah, it's funny because people get into the habit of thinking that there's like these certain experiences that are like, I don't know, like peak experiences or like feelings that they're meant to be having about life. Like something that if I'm having a great time that I can share on social media, like that's the kind of thing I'm proud of. But there are these like for me, it was like if it was just a very average, like, I don't know, moment of doing washing up or doing something very boring and seemingly uneventful, it would seem like, oh, that's just stuff that it just need to get past it, get out of the way. It's like there's certain, like, in the moment, if I ever slowed down enough to actually be in the moment, I'd spring straight out of it into the world of thinking again, because I wouldn't feel comfortable being average in that moment. I wouldn't feel comfortable being uncomfortable. You know, if I quietened down and then had a negative feeling about myself, I'd then pop out into like, oh, I want to achieve this. I'd be full of the goals, but there'd be almost a kind of difficulty. And I didn't realize this until someone actually pointed it out to me, but actually I got almost like addicted to thinking. I got addicted to overthinking, so that when I actually slowed down, it was like, oh no, I can't do that because I'm going to be negligent, or I can't do that because I'm going to be you know, like I'm not going to be exceptional enough. And it was all about I don't know, part of the process seems to be like you said, like kind of like genuinely being okay with whatever shape the now actually takes, even if it's quite ugly or quite if I get a feeling of shame, or I get a feeling of embarrassment, or I get a feeling of I'm never going to be good enough at this thing, or whatever feeling comes up in the moment, it's kind of like not being afraid of the feelings that come up. And it's weird because most of us are conditioned to kind of say no to certain feelings and kind of pursue other feelings, and like when someone really said to me that that there's no state of mind that there's like kind of a target. There's no target state of mind. It's just like when you stop, like you said, trying to get over the wall, then what you find is that when you stop making it a target, what you actually fall back into is the present moment, which is actually well-being. Like the well-being's there. It's just not quite what we think it is. Well-being isn't the good feeling. Well-being is coming back to the now and being okay with genuinely knowing that you're safe in whatever feeling arises. There's a degree of that's well-being. It's kind of the natural state. It's the natural place that we come back to. But the temptation is to spring out of it,
Yeah, and you know what? I think this comes nicely to some of the performance stuff actually, because when musicians actually experience this more than they realize, and they talk about it happily, but they just don't identify what it is, or they don't recognize the true significance of what they're feeling or going through. And what I mean is that moment on stage where it could be 5 minutes playing one song, or it could be an hour set. There's nothing else in the world that exists when I'm on stage apart from every second that I'm living. Whether it be looking over at some part in the crowd, turning around to Benj and Joe, or looking at someone and someone's going like, yeah, type of thing. I'm intaking that right now. Whatever's happening now is I'm intaking. I'm not going, did I leave the oven on? Do you know what I mean? And that is the pure demonstration of what it's like to have good well-being, be comfortable with what you're doing and be happy or sad, and just being in the now, and the thing that because it's such a pure state of mind, physically and emotionally and mentally, that the reason why I believe that a lot of musicians turn to party culture is because the way that it activates people's brains, and with the serotonin and the dopamine, and when they connect with people, with oxytocin and stuff, like developing very highly in the brain, you kind of start to go, that's what people are chasing. And they think that putting excess substances within their body from one way or another will achieve that same state, but it doesn't. The only way to get there is to tap in to that feeling when you're on stage. And I'm quite happy now where I'm able to tap into that on a daily thing. I'm so focused on my now, that I don't need to worry about anything else. It sounds a bit bizarre because people take it the wrong way. They go like, would you not care for your mum or dad? Do you not care for your kids' well-being or anything while you're in that state of mind? Well, of course I do. That I'm not saying that I'm not doing those things. I'm saying right now, that in this moment I'm talking to Nick, I'm talking to you, and that's what I'm concerned with right now, and I'm happy to be in that, and I'm taking this information, chatting, producing some wonderful oxytocin in our minds and having a great time, and it's wonderful to be here, and to experience this and do that type of thing. That's living in the now. It's the same feeling as I'm on stage is right now. I'm having a fantastic time, Nick, and it's very, yeah, right. And it's very easy to tap into it once you can understand the mechanics, one for a better way. I'm not saying I do it all the time, because fuck me, dude. There's times, you know, I had a wobbler the other day, you know, I was just like, oh my God, you know, and it took me 3 or 4 days to recover from it, you know. But at the same time, though, I was recognizing why it was happening. And I was very aware of the situation. You know, I was very aware something caused me to feel very negative, and I dealt with it. And I chatted to my mother-in-law and my partner about it, and kind of had more clarity in my mind about the situation. And as much as I was comfortable with the situation, it just took me a few days to kind of, you know, level out again and be where I am now, you know. But that's okay too, you know. You're still living in that now, but it doesn't always have to be positive and happy, like you said, you know. Whether it's a negative or positive, it's still important to kind of, you know, really be in touch with that, I find. Even, you know, just as much as a negative, because that's where people get that term, especially in males, let's say, where you bottle it up. You don't acknowledge what's happening. You just go, well, to deal with that later. You know, you package it up and store it in some storage facility in your brain somewhere, and when you least expect it, the door breaks on it and all this stuff spills out. I've got nothing in that cupboard, you know, and, you know, I'm cool with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it reminds me of a quote from Sydney Banks, who was a theosopher that I based a lot of my work on and I write about in the book. And he said that if the only thing people learn was not to be afraid of their experience, so their feelings, then that alone would change the world. And I think what you said there is really spot on, that it's actually like our relationship with the so-called negative feelings, but they're not really negative feelings, because we miss the fact that we are the ones labeling the feelings.
Exactly.
So they're just feelings, but we then think about the feelings and then think about our thinking, and then we go, I've got a problem because I've started this, you know, hamster wheel. And actually just being able to, in the same way that a baby does, like, it doesn't know anything about language or labels. It just has, that's an intense experience, that's a different experience. And then later on, someone teaches them a word for the feeling. This one's called anxiety, or this one's called love, or this one's called pleasure, or whatever. And it's in the labeling, it's in the kind of chopping up of the experience, and kind of categorizing it, or kind of separating, you know, allowed and not allowed. It's in that duality that kind of creates the suffering in a funny sort of way. So when we
hang on, dude.
fall out of it,
right? Yeah, big time, dude. It's that's really interesting. You know, saying the duality of it all. You know, I think I think as well with it, you do end up having an appreciation for negativity. In inverted bunny rabbit ears. You know, because without that, you know, it's your good and normal the baseline begins to sink. And I think appreciating, you know, just like I said, you know, had a bad few days, had a wobbler, you know, like through something that I read, and I was like, you know, like type of thing, and which was about me, you know. And it you know, again, like you said, I was well aware. It was like, I don't care about that person. I don't care about what they said. I really don't. I was more bothered by the fact that other people saw it. That's what really bothered me. And do other people really care? No. And then I was like, you know, hang on a minute, I'm wrapping myself up in this thing here, you know. And like you said, like, it started off being like, oh no, I'm slipping back, I'm like retracting 2 years of hard work type of thing, you know. And I was like, no, I'm not retracting anything. I'm not taking any steps back. It's just right now, I'm going to experience these things, and they're not necessarily nice things, you know, but I know for well that if I can just stay calm and not react brashly with it, you know, I can comfortably not like ride it out, because riding it out is not acknowledging what's happening. I think acknowledging it and kind of going, all right, yeah, okay, you won this time, you know, and that's okay. Failures and losses, even if you know, they sound extreme for what we're talking about in these tiny scenarios, but you know, if you're taking a sports analogy into the kind of emotional things there, it's a loss or a failure or what have you, and you go, that's okay, because tomorrow's the next game, and today I'm just going to concentrate on getting to the end of today. And then, you know, that kind of stupid thing of like, tomorrow's a new day, you know, like sometimes it works, you know, like I find myself being a hypocrite with sayings, because I hate like some things. I'm like, that's bollocks, you know, and then sometimes I go, I see where that saying works here. You know, it's like, it's okay, today's going to be a funny old day, XYZ, and then I get through my day, you know, and I'll go to bed, and I'm not writing the day off. I'm doing what I can. I'm still, I think, Nick, I think it's a case of you're able to stay productive and you're still able to keep moving forward and walking. You might just have like some dust on your shoulders you need to like rub off throughout the day, as it were, in some sort of weird adage. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's I'm kind of reminded of a distinction that someone, I think I've already said the phrase in this interview actually, but there's a distinction that a guy called Dr. George Pransky talks about. He talks about the difference between living and the game of life as two different things, and yes. He says that like the game of life is all the comings and goings and the happenings and the meanings and the stuff and the achievements and you know, like you said, what we call a win or a lose, like, and we can play that game as if that stuff is real stuff, and then the other side of life is all about the fact that we're having an in the moment experience. Yeah. And so like there's one side of life which is totally changeable, totally like can be seen from different angles. And then there's this other side where like a win or a lose makes no sense, because it's an experience. It's all unified, because it's all an experience. A win, that's my experience. A lose, that's my experience. Pain, that's my experience. It's like it's all owned by me, created by me, known by me, and that kind of stillness and that side of life is the bit that people often overlook. You know, they overlook because the stuff of life and the game of life is so appealing. You know, to get kind of embroiled in the story and the meanings and stuff, that we kind of overlook this very simple fact that our experience is being thought up moment to moment to moment, and there's this constant flow of now, like you said, and you know, because like what I was hearing you say about like having different adages for different things, and sometimes they kind of contradict. It's because of that. It's because they're coming from this place of the game of life, and like in this situation do this, in this situation think this, rather than like coming from a place of something which is rock solid, which is who you are, you know, and your ability to think, you know. And, you know, so that's I guess that's why I've kind of ended up heading away from like the tools and techniques of you know, like some performance psychologists sort of go in for visualizations and that sort of thing. I don't tend to do that. I tend to point people in the direction of the bit that doesn't change in themselves. Yes. Because it doesn't, once you explore that part of yourself, it matters less like the contents of your thinking or the contents of the experience, because that there's always that deeper connection with well-being, with safety, with truth, with who you actually are. And so it doesn't I just find like it's not like I don't have I probably now have more intense experiences than I've ever had. It's not like I put hand on heart and say I feel happier all the time, but I do feel a kind of I no longer say to people like I'm feeling really happy and that's a really good thing, or I'm feeling really sad and that's a really bad thing. I might notice that a feeling comes up and comment on it, but I'm less concerned with like which feeling's coming up. It's like it's not like front page news anymore. Whereas it used to be like, I've had this thing that I'm calling it a failure. I haven't noticed I've called it a failure, and this failure is something I've got to think about. And now it's just like, oh, I'm seeing this thing as a failure, and I'm being quite negative about it. Oh, I've noticed that thinking. Okay, cool. All right, it's not very pleasant. Okay, but it's not like I need to do something about it because it doesn't mean anything about me. It's like it's normal. It's normal to have thinking without it's not everyone does that. And it doesn't need to be we don't need to cling on to the thinking. That's the thing we tend to do. Like if we only see one side of life, like the game of life side, and don't know that we can kind of stop that role or those games that we play, then we've constantly got to be winning it, or we're not. We don't really count. But in truth, like you've already won. You're already there. You've already arrived. Who you are isn't going anywhere. It's like it can't be improved. It can't be diminished if you have a career failure or something. The core of who you are is permanent, is infinite, is safe, and it's not always obvious to people. That's the thing. It's not always obvious. So that's why I find myself sort of pointing back to that. Because it's not to say you can't play the game full out and like really pour heart and soul into an album launch or a book launch or something, or learning a skill. It's great, but
yeah, absolutely, man. And I think with that in mind, I very much felt like that. How can I say? Do you think you can you tap into one when you need one and tap into one more than when you need it, like at any given time? Because I think I'm able to do that, which is why I'm kind of, I was saying to other people on the podcast, they're saying like, yeah, dude, you're very like calm now, like not erratic, and it's like, well, yes, my brain is still like, like goes a million miles an hour, worrying about it does worry about stuff, but I can acknowledge it in a second and go like, like, okay, cool, but right now I'm doing this and this is cool, and it kind of doesn't put it to bed, but it just kind of upstairs isn't as foggy as it once was.
Yeah
And I think when you're able to kind of, again, like, I joke, I say I'm more namaste now in my life. I don't have anger. That's an interesting thing about it. I used to get this pent up anger at everything. Like if I'm doing the washing up, as menial as that is, and then you'd put a spoon, you've just finished washing a spoon and put it in the rack, and you miss it and it goes ding 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 and it falls on the floor. Usually you'd be going fucking, like, and like bang the kitchen top and throw the sponge in the water and be like, fucking hell, like it's this ginormous thing. And that's how easy it was to set off this frustration, this anger. And, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I do it, I go, bollocks, but not like banging and crashing shit, and then start shouting at people because there's this thing of rage somewhere, I used to have this terrible rage, that I just could not control. And now it's at bay, but in a comfortable way. I can tap into it when I need it if I'm able to write something that's angry or aggressive, I can use my experience of rage and anger and frustration into this particular moment, you know, tap into these emotions in a safe manner, if you know what I mean, you know. And it's quite a powerful thing, you know. I was talking to Shane from Those Damn Crows just the other day on a show about this exact thing, and you know, and he was saying, "Are you saying that we're like superheroes with superpowers?" And I was like, "Yes." Once you can get to that bit, I think there is an element of that. Well, it certainly feels that way, because I think the superpower is being able to use it all the time and it be normal. That's the kind of like superpower aspect of it, because, and I don't mean this in a judgmental way, you see a lot, you know, the majority of people, I'm going to say a big good 95% of people I see sadly aren't there yet for one way or another, and that masks itself in things like depression, you know, and like we've spoken about, like anxiety in forms of areas, you know, you get people that are afraid to leave the house, you know, they're afraid to eat food, you know, they're afraid to stop eating food, you know, they have addictions to, you know, alcohol or sugar, you know, or drugs or something, you know. And I think, and you know, there's a part of me nowadays where I'm like, oh man, you know, I want to be able to kind of like help people steer in that direction where they don't have to have a pitfall of feeling like that. But at the same time, some people have to, you know, that everyone's on their own journey, and they're all on, you know, you've got the Nick path and I've got the Nikki path, and you know, it's great in days like today where we get to share the same path for a few hours and then crack on, you know. And yeah, it's amazing when you kind of really understand yourself and you really understand those kind of aspects of life, and understanding feelings, emotions, physically and mentally, and you know, like I said, being able to tap into them when you need them, you know, is the kind of like superpower, and it's quite the thing. Yeah, and like you said, that there's times when you can't, you know, you do make mistakes, as you say, but it's not necessarily like making a mistake. You know, we've all been able to learn how to walk from like 10 months old or something, but there's still moments when you're an adult where you fall off a curb and do your ankle in, you know. Doesn't mean it's a failure, it just happens, you know, type of thing, if there was a weird simile there. But yeah, you know, it's interesting when you're able to kind of, again, you know, when you're really able to kind of like see this and feel it, you know, from what it really is, you know. It is quite a thing. I suppose one thing that would be interesting to ask you is how, because you've worked with a huge variety of people, from, you know, people that can't get up and, you know, they can't get up and play in a pub, to people who are releasing #1 records around the world, and sports stars of the lot, you know. Is there a similarity to the whole thing?
Yes. This is the thing that I often find myself saying to people. It's like, you know, do you realize that this is actually quite a normal experience, you know? You know, we're talking about the game of life and living. It's like, you know, the contents of someone's experience, like the stuff that happened in their past, or the stuff that they're preparing for, or the stuff that they want. Like, all the contents is different, very uniquely personal. But the kinds of experiences that people have. So having an experience of sort of feeling insecure, about something. Like there's not anybody who hasn't had that experience, and the mistake that we can make, especially with, you know, it's particularly bad actually for some of the people who are put on a pedestal by other people, because they're often, it's almost like the higher you go, the harder it can be for the people around you to sort of speak their truth. They feel like they've got to be nice to you, or they feel like they've got to kind of please you. But you know, I find myself in quite not privileged, but kind of, it feels very important to be able to have an honest conversation about what's going on in someone's head, because often they don't have a very honest conversation with the people around them. Things only go so shallow. And actually by saying, oh, actually, you know, you've got a big show, and you've said that you've got performance anxiety, and you've said that, you know, you should be enjoying this a lot more than you are. And I said, well, do you realize that that's a very common experience? You know, I know that not everyone is on this particular stage or on this particular festival, but you know, having moments of nervousness or having moments of anxiety, or seeming to be kind of overcome with a very strong emotion and wanting to try and change it but not being able to change that feeling, like that's the human condition. And, you know, I'm not saying that just by saying that it makes them sort of pop out of it, but once we start to explore together, you know, am I that different? Am I really? Am I really that different? You go, well, because you just described that, and I've had that kind of thing, and you know those you know, as far as I've, you know, checked out any of the sort of highest achieving musicians that I've ever sort of spoken to or read about, like they've all had their version of it. You know, we might not necessarily believe what they say. You know, sometimes someone will say, oh yeah, well, I'm just not, I just don't like recording in the studio, and you go, well, that's okay for you because you're Robbie Williams or whatever. You know, it doesn't, you know, whatever, you know, no one really believes you when you're saying that. But when I don't know, like when that exploration comes back to just that pure, like, simple human component, that kind of spiritual component of like just what's true, who we are, the contents don't matter so much. There, in answer, a very long answer to your question, but yes, like there's this kind of weird paradox of we're uniquely, completely different to each other, and we are utterly identical. Like that, it's not that one of those is more true. It's like they're both equally true. It's this weird kind of paradoxical thing about the human condition. It's like every single supposed like individual, that's good. That's a unique story, a unique voice, a unique way of, a unique gift to the world. Like you said, a purpose, a unique kind of trajectory in life, but it's made of the same awareness, the same consciousness, the same love, the same essence. It's like a refraction of light, you know?
Yeah, totally. There's something in there that made me think of this, is the Australian comedian Jim Jeffries. He spoke once about saying how having depression baffles him. And it was a really interesting thing. It was only a couple of minutes long, and he said, and he was sitting down and he was just going, you know, depression baffles me. Everything I've ever worked hard for, I've got. And then sometimes I don't like it at all. And it's all I've ever wanted. I've got everything. I've got, you know, a partner, a child, a career, TV show, a voice on a platform. You know, people would pay good money to come and see him, you know, take time off work or what have you to, you know, see a show that he's doing. And it means everything to him. And he's so grateful to all those people that will do that. But then sometimes he sits there and he's like, what the fuck am I doing? You know, and he said that the depression of that just, it baffles him. And when he said that, that was a huge thing for me, where I was like, shit, yeah, it is baffling, isn't it? You know, and kind of like, why is that? why do, where I had another guest on here, Adam Feasley, sorry. And he's got autism, and he's a frontman of a band. And he was saying like, oh man, I really look up to you and the things you've done. And I was like, I haven't done anything. I was like, no one knows who I am. No one cares who I am. And I haven't done anything. There's people that are your friends who have done far more bigger, greater, better things than I've done. But why is that? I didn't ask him that. Maybe I should, but I was thinking in my head, I was like, why on earth would someone look up to, what I've done? I haven't done anything, and I suppose like that's another part of it. But that depression thing with Jim Jeffries did ring true with me. It was like, yeah, that is a perfect word to describe it. It just baffles you, like there's even times when, where I'm doing lecturing and stuff. And lecturing is one of the most powerful things I've ever done. Talking to a group of students and explaining your life experiences in the industry for better or worse. And you can see them going, thank you. I really appreciate your honesty on that. And you go like, that was quite the thing. It's quite the thing when people go like, thank you, and they send you personal messages saying, I've experienced something similar, and it's nice to know that I'm not the only one, solidarity in that. But even then, man, like sitting on, as simple as, because of COVID or what have you, you're sitting on a Zoom and you have a cohort of students, and it's like, fuck, the pressure to deliver. You've got like, fuck, I've got these people's lives and careers in my hands. What on earth am I doing here? You still go through it. It's the same thing as that. Like before you go on stage, you look out there and you go, oh. Like the last gig I played was February of 2020, and it was Planet Rockstars Winter Zen Festival. I think it's down in Bournemouth. And I think it's like 2,000-3,000 people. I don't know if it's that much, but it was a bloody lot of people for me anyway. It was a lot of people, and there was a moment when the arena's empty, and we're walking through it, and I was just going, fucking hell. And I was like, yeah, the pictures don't make it look like this big. It makes it look really small. And I was like, wow, it's really wide, actually. And then I was like, oh, there's a balcony up there. Oh, shit. There's 2 levels to how people are seeing me.
Yeah.
And you start to go like, that thing in the brain goes like, what are you doing? But as my guitar tech Pete said at the time, as I was just like, spend like 5-10 minutes before I walked out, just like, no one fucking talk to me. Full diva mode, like no one talk to me as I'm just getting into the zone. It's not a visual thing like people saying to do. To me it's more like I just run a few scales, do a couple of like vocal things, not too harsh, just to kind of usually a lot of it is like low humming to get the kind of gravel warmed up in my voice, and just kind of practicing breathing, actually, like almost in a meditative state.
Just kind of checking in with where you are right now, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then it's like, let's go.
Yeah.
And you walk out and you're like, what's up, everyone? And sometimes you surprise yourself. You're like, wow, I'm so comfortable doing this. But again, as we've said, it comes back down to that thing. You're in the now. I'm really enjoying it. And this is me. I am that person that can do that. I like talking to people. I like doing that. Even though I'm introverted as shit, it's not a character that I put on anymore. I am an introvert to some degree. I think on the Myers-Briggs test, I'm an INFJ, which apparently is like the most rarest personality type.
Oh, there you go.
So I'm
Making
like,
you
that's
feel
pretty,
special.
yeah, you know, like that's pretty cool, you know. But it's yeah, it's a thing where you tap into it, isn't it? You know, it's like, I am here, I'm not worrying about anything else, I'm there. And then there's like a, you know, like, excellent, I'm here type of thing, isn't it? Again, it always comes back down to that thing with that, you know. Again, it's quite the, you know, I've said it a million times on this show already, but it's quite the thing, you know, when you're able to really realize that. So with kind of, again, like, sorry, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent there, with that thing where Jim Jeffries is talking about it being baffling about depression, like, have you ever found that? Do you ever look at, you know, before this journey that you're on, you know, did you ever feel like that? Or did you ever look at people and kind of go like, what are you on about, mate? You're having you got the best life or something. Did you ever have those things? Not in a bad way, but it's just like,
Yeah,
like you said, you know.
so like so did I sort of look at people and not understand why they were suffering, you mean?
Yeah, I'd say some really good examples of that would be Kurt Cobain, Chris Cornell, and Chester Bennington. You know, they're literally the height of, you know, the world at their fingertips, and they chose to exit, you know, in a polite manner.
I think I used to be a bit spooked. I think I used to be, well, honestly, I think I used to be very scared of talking about mental health, you know, when I was like a, I don't know, teenager. I think because I'd had this idea, and I think there's a lot of people like this, you know, like that say people have never, you know, had a reason to go to a doctor about it, or they've never you know, like had a conversation with anyone about it. They just kind of had their inner experience and managed to, they've kind of ridden the waves sort of well enough through life. Like that's how I was. And I did have extreme experiences, but it was never enough to kind of take me to a doctor or anything. And so because of that, I kind of thought, oh, I'm okay. And there are other people who've got a kind of problem with it. And what I've noticed through the work that I've done and the kind of the sort of depth of conversation that I have with people is like, that in some ways it's like a kind of, you know, I'm really, because, you know, although I've never sort of gone to anyone in sort of like mental health crisis, I have had the same kinds of experiences. You know, everyone has kind of thoughts about, you know, would the world be better off without me? Like, everyone's had those kind of thoughts, haven't they? Or like,
yeah.
And like, I really respect the kind of bravery about talking about that darkness, because I was so scared of talking about it. I couldn't even, I wouldn't even allow myself. It wasn't just like I was holding back a bit. It was like, it was so far pushed down that I couldn't allow anything out to sort of talk about. And it's sort of, now I feel like I'm much more open to be able to talk about like the truth of my experience. And sometimes it shocks people, like how I talk, how honestly I talk. But no, I can. One thing I've noticed that as I've explored my own psychology, you know, and worked with a lot of people, is that I can understand. I just see commonality everywhere. I was saying it to my wife the other day. I just genuinely don't see people as that different anymore. I don't mean it in a kind of sort of new age kind of like utopian kind of way. I just mean like it just, you know, it just feels like I'm surrounded by, you know, brothers, sisters, cousins, you know,
Yes.
cut from the same cloth, you know.
Yeah, rightly so, dude. Yeah, that's a really powerful thing, man. It's not taking away people's individuality. It's what it is. It's bringing people together with their individuality and knowing that we can all share the same things and feel the same things and be appreciative of one another, positive and negative, and that there's no kind of, you know, boundaries with anything, I think.
Or competition, you know, there's definitely a still a thing. There's still a massive sort of stigma about like who's a good enough musician, who's a you know, who's an important person to know. And I've found myself on a bit of a mission actually to kind of just create a more loving, more accepting, more kind music industry, and that I've only discovered that calling, as it were, when I first started to see how unkind I was being to myself, on a day-to-day basis. And now I feel like I can still be unkind to myself and sort of be very judgmental, but the only times I'd go pointing the finger at other people is when something in me was kind of going, oh, that hurts my feelings, and now I don't think that they're doing it, that those feelings are my feelings, and there's nothing to do with how someone else is showing up. Then it's like, okay, well, that person must be hurting then, so why not reach out to them or help them or have a listening ear for them, or it just doesn't seem to make sense to be pointing to separation all the time. I feel especially now, people are craving connection, and I really think that that's going to be the future of the industry. I think that people are going to and they are already, like, people are waking up to our shared humanity, our shared spiritual essence, or however you word it. I'm not a religious person either, but whatever that is, that's kind of the bit you don't need to intellectualize, but just the stuff, that the part of us that's the same, whatever that is. We point more to that. Good music happens, the right collaborations happen, we have the right kind of open conversations. We don't try and pretend that we're happier than we are. We don't try and make a big meal out of an emotion and just want lots of sympathy. It's just like there's a kind of authenticity, and I think that's my maybe optimistic sense that's where things are generally heading, particularly after COVID. Like, people have had this kind of introspective time. I know people are still suffering, a lot of people are suffering, but I feel a shift. I feel a shift in the industry coming, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to talk about that for a minute, actually, because I think that's an incredible thing that we talk about. We have individual missions of things, And when you said that, I think you said it to me last year at some point when we were catching up, and you're saying that you hope for a calmer and kinder music industry. It's quite a profound thing, dude. And when you realize the simplicity of that statement, that sentiment, that kind of want, that need, when you realize it in such a simplistic format, and you kind of then go, holy shit, there's a problem here. And there is. I think there's a huge problem with the industry with this, the way people talk to each other, and I've tried to call people out on that, where I'd be a simple tech putting away drums into a flight case, and someone go, oi dickhead, can you fucking hurry up? And you'd be like, vastly unnecessary to call me that, mate. Vastly unnecessary. I'm going at a speed that I can safely and correctly put this stuff into a box. I can't move it out first anyway, because it's not the first bit of equipment that loads into the back of the truck, so hurrying it up doesn't achieve anything, actually, because it just allows mistakes to be made. And just because you want to go home early, then change your fucking job then if you don't want to work late. It's type of thing. I remember, stuff like that really just, boils me up, for that stuff. I never understood that kind of, why the need, what have I done that deserves you talking to me like that?
Well, that's what I mean. It's not about you. It's like that someone only does that when they're suffering, or when, well, it stems from the same misunderstanding. Like, if someone thinks that they're, everything needs to be done to the letter in order for them to feel okay, and the stuff outside needs to be managed for them to feel okay, it makes sense to shout at someone. Whereas if they know that their feelings don't come from the outside, well, like, really know, not just like intellectually, but if they really know that they may want something to be done a certain way, but fundamentally they're okay. There's a degree of kind of distance or kind of dissociation from like being so goal orientated, and then they can be more kindness. But you know, the thing is, like, if one person then points the finger and says you're doing it wrong, and then the other person also thinks, you know, outside in, it's like, oh, they've hurt my feelings, and then they're both two people that feel increasingly separate from each other, and actually it's all it is a misunderstanding. It's like they don't know that they're both okay.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, that's all this is. It is. I see it as really simple. It is really at the crux of it is simple. It's just one, but it starts with yourself. It doesn't start with, because you know, a lot of people at the moment are saying about, oh, you know, we've got to sort Spotify out, or we've got to sort these people out, or we've got to make sure that artists are respected. It's like it always starts with the person in the mirror, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm quoting Michael Jackson or Gandhi, but one of them said something like that. that you know, be the change you want to see in the world, you know.
Yeah. It starts with yourself, doesn't it?
But it, you know, I really hated it when some of my mentors and coaches said that. But actually, it's one of those things. It's like this niggling kind of truth. It's like, oh yeah, okay, you want to change the world, you deal with your own inner shit first, you know. And this is why I've ended up following this path of, like, I have a lot of coaching. You know, I've always, you know, for the last, I don't know, 6-7 years, I've had coaching for that reason, because I know that the more I can kind of chip away at my own misunderstanding, that the more I've kind of got to give, and the more kind of extreme cases or extreme kind of problems I can help people with. So it always feels like, if I really wanted to make the impact out there, supposedly, that I want to have, then I have to be prepared to sort of really look at my deepest, darkest, you know, side, as it were. To be able to have the resources, or to be able to, well, no, it's just like, you know, well, Gandhi said this, you know, he said that I am humanity. So it's like he saw, he's a great example of this. He really saw his own transformation as India's transformation. So it's like he changed, instead of changing the world out there, the world he was changing was him. That was the world. And so it had this kind of weird kind of ripple effect, that because he could respond to people who seemed like oppressors, but he could respond to them with love. It just showed the differential between where he was coming from and where the British government were coming from, and it just made it so much more easy. And then people started doing the same thing and came from this place of love, and it was actually a kind of such a force of love that actually then led to this kind of change, and it inspired, you know, Martin Luther King, and that's, I've really found I've drawn a lot of inspiration from that kind of approach of just, you know, you love. That's how you do this. You love other people, you love yourself, and then the insecurity kind of fizzles out by itself, because the truth of it is revealed. I think that's what we're doing here. I think that's what's happening in the industry.
Yeah, big time. Fuck, yeah, I had a few light bulbs there. You know, that some of that is deeply interesting, especially when you realized when you said changing the world starts with here, instead of trying to change out there, you know, in here. That's literally, you know, that's like the last year of my life summed up. You know,
that's not selfish, is it? That's the most altruistic thing you can do, at the same time as being the most selfish. And it's this weird paradox again, but by going within, you know, because, you know, if you are thinking your reality, then when you change yourself, the whole reality changes. You know, you live in heaven on earth rather than hell on earth.
Yeah, absolutely, man, totally. And I think it's with that as well, when people don't like how you've changed, you know, I almost go like, well, you know, then that's fine, then crack on. You know, I'm not going to sit around and make you like me. I'm not going to sit around and force you to stay friends with me because you don't like the life changes that have positively impacted me. Because I think there's a degree of things when you start to see people for really who they are, whereas they look at you of something that you can give them. There's something that you do that in a negative way makes them better or makes them feel better from your negatives. And that's, and I, you know, disagree with that whole setup entirely, and really have like an issue with people doing that now. And in the last year, I've definitely noticed a lot of, well, actually, sadly at the time, most of people that I knew were doing that to me for one form or another. And when you kind of call that out, you know, even if you'd done good things for them, and even if they had done good things for you, as a primary whole of the whole situation, your relationship with people, and that changes because you're like, hang on a minute, this is a one-way street here, where, you know, like people used to take the piss out of me because they'd be like, how have you made it this far, dude? You can't you do that simple basic thing here, or can you not do there? And I used to laugh at it, you know, think like, you know, and then I was like, hang on a minute, you know, I'm an intelligent person, and, you know, you're saying that I'm an idiot because of X, Y, Z, you know, but, you know, I had it from, you know, even my ex-wife said, she was like, oh, you'll never amount to anything. You are I hope you rot, you know, and, you know, there was another plethora of information basically saying that you'll never get anywhere because you can't do anything by yourself, you know. And I remember just thinking, I was like, wow, like you really never knew me, you know. And I'm glad, you know, really, because, and a lot of other people starts to say the same thing. They're like, oh, you're not equipped with the tools of life to be able to do this and that. And it's like, well, actually, that's just, you know, that's just fundamentally incorrect and wrong, you know. And you see, and now when I was like, hang on a minute, you see me in a certain way, and I was like, that's not who I am, you know. And part of my journey was realizing how do people see me, you know. Am I a joke to some people? Am I this to some people? Not to all people, but some people who would like slyly take the piss, and you'd think it'd just be banter or something stupid, and you realize after a while, like, hang on a minute, that's, you know, you're trying to put me on a lower level to you. You know, we're not on the same playing field here, and you think that you're up here compared to me. You know,
that stuff's everywhere, man. Like that's it, yeah. It's not just, you know, there can be some more sort of obvious cases of that sort of thing, but that's exactly the thing. You know, that's a subtle thing, but that's another one of those kind of universals. Like that's what happens if you know, it's like if you think that the world is being done to you, then it's kind of like him versus me or her versus me or whatever.
Yeah,
and it's like some people, their operating paradigm, like how they think the world works, is a kind of me or you reality, rather than you and me reality. And that's quite a, you know, once someone has that kind of epiphany, it's like, oh, it's not, I don't need to win in order for someone, I don't need to lose in order for someone else to win.
Yes.
And they go, oh, so that means I can celebrate when someone wins, and I kind of feel like I'm winning too. Oh, okay, cool. And then it's like, boom, I don't need to stress and worry about, or point the finger, or prod someone with a stick or whatever. It's just you can, you know, you can be met with some, you know, not like verbal abuse or whatever, and it doesn't seem to stick in the same kind of way. And I know people who have sort of come across this understanding, and they get you know, maybe abuse online or something, but it doesn't bother them in the same kind of way, because it's someone suffering over there, and it's like, You can ignore it. You can meet them with love if they're open to it. If they're not open to it, then it's just maybe not the time to talk to them. And it's literally that simple. And then they find a path of, to someone else to go and bother, or they kind of figure, oh, that was weird. He dealt with that really, really well. Oh, maybe I've been a bit of an asshole. So, okay. And I've had people do that. Some people have trolled me online, and I've just responded to them with something very, like, oh, thanks for commenting, or oh, you seem upset about this. And then I've got a message back, not always, by the way, but I've sometimes got a message back that said, I'm sorry about that. I was a bit triggered by what you said there or something. And the fact that it's come from a certain place has helped them to kind of see themselves in the mirror.
Yeah, I've actually had a lot of that recently, funny enough. I've had two experiences with that. One where there was this hate campaign started because people thought I rigged a pitch shifter competition, and I had nothing to do with it apart from I took a job as a self-employed admin work with the Waterbury Music College at the time. And my first job was, can you respond to everyone who's entered the pitch shifter competition? I was like, I've entered that, and I was like, really, really kind of like, wow, I'm in the presence of one of the Claydon brothers, They were massive to me as, growing up, and now to work alongside one of them. This is crazy. And they thought that because I worked there, that they'd chosen me. But that wasn't the case at all. It was, John, who I'd never spoken to, never met, listened to my band, and he's a big grunge fan. So naturally was like, yeah, those guys are cool. And they just played Rambling Man and, just had released a record and been on tour. So yeah, of course, I'll get them to open for us because that makes sense. And then I was met with this fucking almighty backlash through false information, where people that started to try and get my personal information and threaten me with all sorts of stuff. And I was like, that's, I can see why you think that, because my name was on the response thing, but I was only doing a job. I even responded to my own band email because I was told to, I wasn't thinking, wow, this is my chance to get a gig. I was thinking, cool, part of my job is I'm doing this. I didn't once think that, innocently that would happen, and it was, it was a very frustrating thing. And, it gave me terrible anxiety, still does actually in some aspects. Like, I kind of go, oh God, I wonder if this person still thinks that I'm that, even though I was like, okay, I'm going to pull the show. Like, I'm not going to play on it because of the heat that it generated towards me. I thought, I've got a record coming out in a year. I don't want to have this lingering over, you know what I mean? And I certainly don't want Pitch Shifter, who I idolised, getting any hate from something.
Yeah, sure.
Done. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and I felt like, Christ, if I, it felt like this had been created from me, even though it hadn't. It's some fans reading something the wrong way, and it was very, very hard to kind of wrap my head around it. But the funny thing out of that, because of that, I ended up becoming really good friends with Mark, and now he's one of my closest friends, and I speak to him like every other day, and now I end up working for Pitch Shifter.
Yeah.
And I went on that tour because John sent me a message saying, I'm really sorry about what's happening. It's horrible. You don't know anyone who's a driver by any chance? And I said, I actually do tour driving. And he said, could you drive me and my family around on that tour and look after my wife and kids? And I said, absolutely. So I ended up getting on the tour and making friends with everyone in Pitch Shifter.
Yeah.
Now my friends, I talk to everyone in Pitch Shifter. I'm in a WhatsApp group with them all, called the Pitch Shifter Massive, and we get to like hang out every other day chatting about setting the world to rights and music and all sorts of things. And it's great to be a part of that, and I speak to John in LA, and, it's great to see what, seeing his kids grow up, and same with Mark and stuff as well. And I'm very honored that I get to call them my friends, and, they can dote on me and I can dote on them and things like that. They are proper friends, and it's a wonderful, wonderful position to be in. So I suppose out of that, came that, which is lovely. But I also had the thing which you probably saw with like the Rocket Dolls last year, and what was frustrating about that is that, you know, what the other two said isn't true. That didn't happen, you know, and because of that, like people then start another hate campaign about you and things like that. And that came really through someone was shit stirring, you know, and you know, I was making changes in my life for me, you know, and one of them was, you know, I really, really want to have a child, you know, my own blood child, you know, and so I set about doing that, and that upset people. And it's really sad to think that like something that people should be happy for, and people should be kind of having your back and, you know, being a part of it, because it's a beautiful experience. And it's a shame that those people have chosen thinking that I'm an idiot for doing so. And as a result of that, I was like, then I don't want to be around you if you're going to be like that, you know. And you know, it's, you know, and even then, like I put like a thing out about my Patreon and, you know, this podcast, you know, through Patreon, and put about my new record that I'm putting out. You know, I got some people, you know, I had like loads of abuse on it, going like, you're a fucking this and you're that, and I'm like, very, very unwanted. You know, I don't know who you are. You haven't actually liked the band page, because I checked all their profiles out. Some of them were my ex's family members and friends, and it was like, all right, yeah, I see what you're trying to do there, you know, spitefully. And it was like, wow, you know, why did you feel it necessary, can't fucking talk, to do that, you know? And that's what kind of triggered my like downfall the other day, because I was thinking, why have you, you know, why did you feel the need to do that, you know? And what made me feel stupid is that it was on my first post about it a month ago, and I had let it, and I hadn't had any notifications about it, and it had been up there for like 2 weeks. So people could see these comments, and I hadn't like removed them or blocked them or whatever you, and it just made me feel very stupid. And I was just like, oh, you know, because only up until the last couple of days I had removed all social media apps. So the only way that I access social media was by going on like Safari or something like that. So not actually through the actual social media app, to kind of give me like a bit of a gap from it. And then when I got the apps back, I then had all this influx of information, and I was shocked, and I was like, wow. And some of them were, you know, one or two of them who I sent messages to, calling them out on it, and saying like, you know, I thought we were friends, you know, why would you write some damaging material about me on there? Wasn't aggressive at all, you know, didn't swear or anything like that. I was just like, hey, I'm just pulling you up on this comment, why would you say that? And I'm like, oh, you're full of shit. And I'm like, that's not true. And you know it's not true. And they go, well, I've spoken to 3 people. And I went, who are these people? No response. And I said, okay, well, you know, that's not the truth, you know. And some people have said to me, you know, like, oh, it's a bit coincidental. Some people are saying bad things about you, and you're having a child at the same time, ... And I went, funny that, you know, and it's a really bizarre thing, you know, again, but it's because, like, you know, people think that you're doing that you're going to negatively affect their life in some way, and they get very upset about it. And it's like, it's not going to affect anything, you know.
The thing is, because I hear you, and I think the kind of, I don't know, like counterintuitive side of that, you know, because you know, if there's any kind of conflict or any kind of like real feeling of rift, whether, you know, whatever the context is, the difficult thing is to be able to kind of look at those people who are the kind of, you know, perceived perpetrators, and and kind of see life from their perspective. And I don't mean like agreeing with the stuff that they say, but the challenge can be to, you know, like as far as I can tell, people are negative because that makes sense to them in their model of the world. It makes sense to them that they genuinely, you know, if they thought they were okay with someone being the way that they are, then they wouldn't say anything. But the fact that they're saying something means that they must genuinely feel, in their reality, they feel like they're threatened. And it's not to say that that's true; they're not threatened, but that, I don't know. It's I'm saying this for myself, really. It's like, because I know that there are things that really seem like they press my buttons. They really do.
Yeah.
And I can't see out of it in the moment, and I can't see a kind of loving, empathetic way out of it. And then, but in the back of my mind, I know that if I'm feeling animosity to someone, I know that I it's not the only choice I have. Let's put it that way. Like it's not the only option, and I know for certain it's not caused by them. It's not caused, you know, my bad feelings are not caused by them. They're caused by the meaning I give to them.
Yes.
You know? And I know how challenging that is, because it's like, well, fucking awesome. But it there's, you know, I keep coming back to the same truth. Like I've explored it from as many angles as I can. It just looks, it's 100% inside out. And if that's true, that means that I have more freedom in those kind of situations than I sometimes notice that I do, you know?
Yeah.
And even just knowing that in the background, even if I can't necessarily see it in the moment, but knowing that it's true, it means I don't go quite as deep into it, you know? And it kind of means I don't spend weeks worrying about it, rather than you know, sort of springing out of it in a day or two, or like an hour or two. I tend to find myself springing out of those kind of things a lot quicker than I used to.
Yeah.
But it's tricky, you know. Being a human being is tricky, for sure.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's part of the fun, though.
I suppose it is, man.
Oh man, I've enjoyed this. It's great.
It has been good, man. Nick, thank you so much for your time, dude. And I suppose if there's anything, you know, where can people find you on social media?
Well, if they put Nick Bottini into Facebook, they'll find me there. I also run a Facebook group called the Just Play Community.
Yeah.
So a community of musicians who are kind of looking at the inside out understanding. But if people want to find me, they'll find me.
Excellent. I love it.
All right.
Thank you so much for your time, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. Huge love, man.
Likewise. Love to you too. See you soon.
Check out the Nikki Smash Show only on Patreon.